You know me and my brother, we're gonna rule London.
Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really into the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London, where you will find stuff probably unavailable anywhere else. We're an established group with a large membership, and best of all, we're friendly. The link is in the YouTube description section.
Welcome back again, everyone. I was still searching for Diana, the lost love I had not seen for 7 years after serving my prison sentence for supposedly being involved in the Jack McVitie murder, which I had not had anything to do with. My good friend, George Dwyer, and I agreed to try again the following weekend, but during the week, I got involved in some work that made it difficult for me to get away. George rang me, and I explained that our private detective business would have to wait a week. An hour after I put the phone down, George rang back. "I bet you'll come up now," he laughed. "Why?" I asked. "I found her," George said. Suddenly I found myself short of breath. George had discovered Diana's pub was called the Carousel and had rung there. He had learned she was still married and was ready to put the phone down if her husband answered, but luckily it was Diana who picked it up. When George told her he had a message from a mutual friend, Diana, who later said she knew that the mutual friend was me and was pleased but also wary. She had been questioned by the police after my arrest and didn't know if what she'd read about the murders was true. Anyway, she told George she didn't like talking to strangers on the phone. George immediately went to the pub, discreetly introduced himself to Diana, and told her that I'd been thinking about her for nearly 7 years. Diana was not totally convinced, but agreed to go to a Leicester hotel a couple of days later to meet me again. The agreed time was 8 p.m. As a boxer, I never suffered from butterflies. I knew I was good and could handle myself, and always walked from the dressing room to the ring with no tummy rumblings at all. But waiting for Diana in the hotel room that evening, I went slowly but steadily to pieces. By 8 p.m., I was almost a nervous wreck. 7 years was a long time, I kept telling myself. Things change. People change. Before the arrest, I'd been a happy-go-lucky man about town, a wealthy businessman with a neat line in chat to match my expensive clothes, not bad looking for my 44 years, and supremely confident in myself because of my business success. In short, a winner. But I knew that prison had changed me. 7 years for something you did was hard enough to take. 7 years for something you didn't do was a knockout blow that was bound to take a heavier toll. I looked at myself yet again in the mirror. Yes, I had lost weight, and I was 7 years older. But would Diana detect something lacking in me? Would she feel that the happy-go-lucky spirit that had attracted her all those years ago had died? That my eyes had lost their sparkle? That the effervescence and cavalier approach to life had been replaced by a quieter, almost inhibited shyness? That 7 years locked away from society had robbed me of my personality, leaving me a shadow of my former self? Would she see not the winner she had once admired, but a loser to be avoided? In the end, I bottled it. After all the build-up, I couldn't face the confrontation and the accompanying possibility of rejection. Not in the hotel foyer, anyway. If the reunion was not to be how I had imagined and dreamed about throughout all those imprisoned years. I wanted it to take place in the privacy of the room, where we could at least be polite and brief and make small talk, then go our separate ways without too much hurt and certainly without any fuss. So, at 8 p.m., I asked George to go down and bring Diana to the room. As I started on yet another packet of cigarettes, new worries started banging away in my brain. What if she was scared to go to a hotel room with a man she had met just once? What if she wasn't just scared but mightily offended? What if she just walked out? I was piling one obstacle on top of the other when the door opened, and there she was standing before me, blonde and beautiful, just as I remembered her. As we stood there looking at each other, smiling shyly, I knew it was going to be all right, and I walked over to her and gave her a kiss. "Well, I think I'll be going," said George. "Bless him." And he went out, closing the door quietly behind him. Diane and I talked and talked. She was eager to tell me how much she had wanted to get in touch, how many letters and cards she had written, only to tear them up because she didn't want to cause me problems. In the end, she said, she reluctantly decided that she would leave it to me. She was so pleased that I'd tracked her down and had felt confident that I would do so. For my part, I was eager to tell her that I felt the same about her as I had done before I went away, but I stressed that if everything was all right in her life, I didn't want to spoil things and cause her problems. She immediately reassured me that I'd come back at the right time. She had left home once while I was away, but had returned. Now she was so unhappy with her husband that she was on the point of leaving again. When she had read that I'd been out for a pre-release weekend, she'd considered ringing, but had feared that I'd be too busy. The talking went on, and then quite naturally it seemed, we went to bed. I would like to be able to describe the sheer joy of holding, caressing and making love with a woman you adore after nearly 7 years without any female contact whatsoever. But it is beyond me. I would think it is beyond most people. There is only one word to describe my feelings that night. They were wondrous. I started to pop up to Leicester regularly, and eventually Diana decided to leave home. It was a difficult decision for her because her daughter, Claudine, was only 12, but she felt it was best for everyone involved, so she moved in with a girlfriend in Beulah Hill at Crystal Palace in South London. Diana was so good with people, particularly the elderly, that I couldn't wait to introduce her to Mum and the old man. I felt sure they would adore her as much as I did, and I wasn't disappointed. The old man did not make friends easily, but he took to her at once. Diana really cares about people, and the old man quickly realized this. They got on really well. Mum thought she was great, and said it was a pity I hadn't met her years before. Mum never spoke badly of Dolly, but she went off her after the shabby way she behaved over the Ince affair. More than once, Mum said my life could have been so much happier if I had met Diana first. A friend of mine, Wilf Pine, former manager of the hugely successful rock band Black Sabbath, kindly loaned me a house, and Diana and I moved in together. Immediately after the breakup, Claudine and her brother Ian stayed with their father in Leicester, but it wasn't long before Diana and her husband agreed that it was best for the children if they moved to London. Some loyal pals made sure I had a few quid to help put me back on my feet, and I was able to buy a flat in Worcester Park in Surrey. The kids came down, and soon we were all living happily under one roof. Sleeping had never been a problem for me. I'd always had the knack of being able to cut myself off from the hassles and aggravation of everyday living, and I managed this in prison, despite all the problems. But when I started living with Diana, I would wake up in the middle of the night, shouting at the top of my voice. A dream would set me off and I'd wake up in a sweat, but I could never remember what the dream was. It did happen once in prison, at Maidstone, and I woke myself up shouting. When it happened at home, I would get up and have a coffee, then go back to bed, but then I'd have to get up again, and it would be backwards and forwards like that all night. Diana was worried, and a little frightened to begin with, but as soon as she senses the build-up now, she shakes me and I slip back into a peaceful sleep. I found I could go on television to talk about the past and my time inside, but in one-to-one situations, particularly with women, I'd find myself stumbling over my words with embarrassment. So you can imagine how awkward I felt when people actually wanted my autograph. I'd got a job working on a big cutlery and silverware stand at the Ideal Home exhibition at Olympia and attracted a lot of publicity. Around 80,000 people passed through the exhibition each day, and after a while, I started feeling as though many of them were looking at me and pointing me out to their friends. One day, a couple of girls asked me for my autograph. Not knowing what to do, I said, "You must have got me mixed up with someone else. I'm nobody famous." One of the girls laughed. "We've seen your picture and read about you. You're the Kray twins' brother, aren't you?" Of course, I signed my name for them, but I did feel funny doing it. And then it happened again and again. A London Evening Standard reporter must have noticed, because he came up for a chat. He mentioned I was working, as though it must be a new experience for me. I told him I'd always worked despite the notoriety. But 10 hours a day, he was shocked. "I like it," I said. The next day I picked up a copy of The Standard. The reporter had written an article saying Charles Kray was working at Olympia and signing more autographs than he was selling cutlery. I thought it hilarious. Communication with Dolly became cold and casual. We only spoke to each other about our son Gary, but I knocked even that on the head when she did something I'll never forgive her for. Dolly would be the first to admit that she is a hard, unemotional individual, but what she did to my family, particularly Gary, was quite spectacular in its selfishness and brutality. When George Ince had been released from prison, Dolly had decided it was not convenient for Gary to live with her. She did not discuss it with him, but waited until he went out one day, then packed all his belongings in a suitcase and left it on the doorstep for Gary to find when he came home that night. He went to live with Mum and the old man in Bunhill Row. But I always made sure he kept in touch with Dolly. I'd always got on well with Dolly's mother and was very upset one day to hear she was ill. She was staying at the home of Dolly's elder sister, so Gary and I went round there with some flowers. She was a lovely woman of about 70 and thought the world of her grandson. We had a nice chat, and before we left, she whispered, "Just because I'm getting old, they think I'm senile. But don't worry, I know exactly what's going on." I smiled and took her hand. "Well, you know what we think of you," I said. "I'll be running around, but I'll be back to see you in a couple of weeks." Early one morning, about 10 days later, I was going on a visit to Parkhurst and left a note for Gary, reminding him not to forget to ring his mother. When I came back from Parkhurst around 7 p.m., an awful atmosphere hit me as soon as I walked in the door at Bunhill Row. Mum and the old man were in tears. I wondered what the hell had happened. Then Mum said, "Charlie, I've never said anything about Dolly, but I think this is terrible. After you left this morning, Gary phoned her." I nodded. I told him to. He asked how she was and said, "Can I come and see you today?" She didn't want him to. Then, Mum was finding it hard to speak through her tears. I put my arm around her. Then, Gary asked how Nana was. Mum couldn't speak for a few seconds. Then she said, "Dolly just told him, dead and buried," and put the phone down. I went numb. Then cold fury swept through me. How could Dolly not tell us her mum had died? How could she not give us the chance to pay our respects at the funeral? It was almost unbelievable. "That's it," I snapped. "That's the end." Seething, I got on the phone and rang one of Dolly's brothers, Raymond. "Dolly's taken a right liberty," I said, and told him what had happened. "Charlie," he said sympathetically. "We never thought our sister was that bad. We thought she'd let you know." "Somebody should have rung Ray," I told him. "We thought you were away." "That didn't cut any ice. I respected your mum, Ray. If I'd been in China, I would have come home. It's bad enough me not being there, but Gary." I was so angry I couldn't speak. Then finally I said, "Anyway, that's the end for me. It's the most terrible thing to do to anyone." After that, I told Gary I didn't want to have anything to do with the family. Dolly felt guilty about Gary. For the next few months, she would ring him a couple of times a week, but it was purely because she felt she had to, not because she wanted to. She is incapable of feeling much for anyone other than herself. I would have expected Dolly to take Gary home to her flat, but she never did. I would have thought she could have taken him to see Nancy. After all, they grew up as brother and sister, but she never did. Perhaps I should not have been too surprised. Dolly was jealous of Mum's popularity and stopped Nancy from visiting because she knew the child loved her. Every one of Dolly's relations said it was a bitchy, hurtful thing to do, but Dolly didn't care. She was the only person who didn't like my mother. And the reason? She knew she couldn't compare with her in any respect as long as she lived. At one time, both Gary and I missed Nancy terribly, so when a young bloke I knew said he often saw her, I asked him to set up a meeting with her for us. I told him to let us know if he wouldn't be seeing her so we wouldn't be waiting unnecessarily. Well, we waited. Nancy didn't turn up, and neither did the bloke who was due to see her. That was the end for me, and I decided not to bother anymore. It was painful because I'd thought the world of her, even though she was another man's child. I started visiting the twins while they were together in Parkhurst. I didn't moan to them about my 10 years because they were sentenced to 3 times that. We did discuss the events that had put us away, but neither Ronnie nor Reggie wanted to know about the problems I had faced because of the Kray notoriety. I was out and they were still inside, they said. They would love to have my worries. I did mention that I'd warned them not to trust those idiots, the so-called firm, particularly Hart and Donahue. But the twins, as usual, took the view that it wasn't worth talking about. It was a thing of the past. Finished. Nothing could be done to change what had happened. So best forget it. For 2 criminally minded people, the twins are strange in that they do not like talking about crime or violence. As young men, they never discussed it. And in prison, all the talk of villainy and boasting drove them round the bend. Because of their name and reputation, other inmates used to seek them out to try to impress them, and it bothered the twins so much that they would ask to be put in cells on their own. For years they were marked men, as they had been on the outside, and sometimes the pressure got to such a pitch that they exploded. During the first few months of my freedom, Mum phoned me saying that there had been an upset in Parkhurst. Ronnie, it seemed, had gone into one and belted a couple of prison officers. They had injected him to sedate him and chucked him in the chokey block. Mum and I were on our way to Parkhurst at once. They told us we would have to see Ronnie in his cell because he wasn't well enough to go to the visitors' room. That surprised us, but it was nothing to the surprise we got when we saw the state of Ronnie and the cell, which was filthy and stank to high heaven. Even I, who had spent years inside, was shocked, and it shocked Mum very badly. I couldn't believe that the authorities had allowed us to see the state of it. I suppose they felt it better to let us see Ronnie in those conditions than stop the visit altogether in case we thought something was wrong. There was just an iron bed in the cell, and Ronnie was sitting on it. He looked awful. His eyes were lifeless, with bags under them, his skin sallow, and his normally neatly combed hair was dirty and straggly. The twins and I were never demonstrative towards Mum, despite our deep love and respect. But that day, As Mum leaned towards him, Ronnie grabbed her by the arms and kissed her warmly on the cheek. He was ashamed of the cell and upset that we had been brought there. Mum said that it was terrible to see him looking so dreadful in a place like that, but Ronnie just said, "Mum, I had a fight. I hit a couple of screws. What do you think they're going to do? Give me a medal?" He always took what they dished out without moaning or complaining. We sat at the foot of the bed talking to Ronnie for nearly 2 hours, and at the end of the visit, Mum said that, despite everything, she felt better for having seen him. Ronnie replied quietly that he was pleased we'd come. He had needed to see us. It was an emotional and highly personal visit, and a prison officer sat behind us all the time, listening to every word. Mum's stamina was amazing. She hardly missed a visit, every week, winter or summer, from the moment we were arrested and on remand in Brixton to the time when we were sent to far-flung prisons in Durham, Leicester and Chelmsford, then Albany, Parkhurst and Maidstone. It was a feat that only a deeply caring, loving mother could have achieved. Remember, she was getting up at 4 a.m. for her office cleaning job, then working in the pub at Bishopsgate. But there was one visit I forbade her to make, to Long Larton in February 1982. Reggie had been transferred there from Parkhurst, and Mum was all set to go after receiving a distressing phone call from a prison official. I told her the visit would be awful and would make her ill. For Reggie had tried to kill himself. Early one morning in February, Mum had rung me in tears at my home in Crystal Palace. "Reggie's tried to commit suicide," she sobbed. "What?" I couldn't believe it. Ronnie had told me he had a feeling all was not well with Reggie, but I put it down to the change of jail. He would get used to Long Larton after a few weeks. He tried to slash his wrists, Mum said. She was in a dreadful state. "I'll be right over," I said. "I'll ring the prison from your place." I covered the 15 miles in less than half an hour and rang the prison. It was true, they told me. Reggie had tried to slash his wrists. It was a nasty incident, but he was recovering and everything was under control. I was not convinced. I asked if I could visit him that day and they agreed. Mum wanted to come with me, but I felt it better if I saw Reggie's condition first. Obviously things were bad, and I didn't want her upset more. Also, I sensed trouble, and I wanted someone other than family with me. Someone honest and trustworthy, with no criminal record, who would be a reliable witness. I chose an East End mate, Laurie O'Leary, and we arrived at Long Larton that afternoon. Reggie was in the hospital wing. He had been feeling depressed and wanted to be on his own, we were told. Ah, I thought, so they knew he wasn't well. What else did they know about my brother that had led him to try to take his own life? As we followed a prison officer to Reggie's cell, I wondered what state he was going to be in. Nothing could have prepared me for what we were about to see. Like our father, Reggie had always been fussy about cleanliness. As a young man, he kept himself spotless. You rarely saw Reggie unshaven or with untidy hair, and he was always dressed in clean, neatly pressed shirts and suits. So the sight that greeted me when I looked through the flap on Reggie's cell door jolted me. He was sitting on his bed, his clothes creased as though he'd slept in them, his uncombed hair standing on end, and with 2 or 3 days' growth of beard. He looked like a raving lunatic who had been locked up for 20 years. Laurie and I went in and, after the usual pleasantries, I motioned towards one of his arms, which was heavily bandaged. "Why did you do it, Reg?" I asked. There was no point in beating about the bush. Reggie shook his head. I don't know. There must be a reason, I persisted. I don't know what's wrong with me, he said. People keep saying strange things to me. They keep taking a pop at me. I looked at Laurie. It did not sound like the Reggie we knew, and I didn't know what to do for the best. I looked at his arm again. How on earth did you do all that? With my glasses, he replied. Apparently, he broke his glasses in half and used a piece of a lens to cut into his wrist. Listening to him describe it made me go cold. He had been alone in his cell, and no one had seen him until an officer had spotted him covered in blood. I stared at Reggie as he talked. I could not get over the state he was in. I'd never seen him like that in my life, and all I could think was that no one in their right mind breaks their glasses and saws into their wrist. I had to ask him again. But why, Reg? It's strange with people who have gone over the edge. When we had arrived, he was reasonably okay, although not like the Reggie of old, of course. Then suddenly when I asked him that question, he seemed to break up in front of our eyes and finally cracked. Thank you for listening. I hope you are enjoying hearing my story, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section.